Cold wind pushed across the plains as Annie Mercer stepped down from the stagecoach, her boots sinking into the frozen dirt outside Hartman Range. Her gloved hand trembled as she lifted a burlap bag from the ground. Behind her, a thin little boy clung to her coat. His name was Will, and his fingers were ice cold. In the pale morning light, Annie saw a man waiting near the gate. Broad-shouldered, weather-worn, unsmiling. Cole Hartman, the rancher who'd sent for a bride he didn't truly want. A gust of dust swept between them, carrying the sharp scent of winter sage. Cole's jaw tightened. Annie's heartbeat stumbled. Will squeezed her hand, and in that suspended, breathless moment, none of them knew if this meeting was the beginning of salvation or heartbreak. The ranch yard was silent except for the low groan of the wind slipping around the barn. Annie stood still, her breath clouding in the cold, watching Cole Hartman shift his weight like a man preparing to say something he didn't want to say. He removed his hat slowly. "Miss Mercer," he said, voice deep, quiet, and colder than the air around them. "You shouldn't have come." Annie felt the words land like a stone dropped into her chest. Will's small hand tightened around hers. She braced her shoulders, though her legs trembled beneath the long wool skirt she'd mended twice on the stage ride. "I received your letter," she said softly. "You asked me to come. I asked before everything changed." Annie looked at him, really looked, and saw the grief hanging on him like an extra coat. Heavy, unspoken. She had known he'd lost his wife 2 winters ago, but the man before her carried loss like it was carved into his bones. Will stepped half behind her. "Ma? Are we staying here?" His voice cracked on the last word. Cole's eyes flicked to the boy, thin, pale, trying to look brave though the cold bit at his cheeks. Something in the rancher's face shifted, only slightly, but Annie saw it. She knelt beside Will, brushing his hair gently from his forehead. "We'll talk with Mr. Hartman," she whispered. "Everything will be all right." She hoped her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Cole looked away toward the corral, unable to hold her gaze. "Miss Mercer." "Annie, I didn't expect a child." Annie swallowed hard. "Will is not my son by birth. I took him in when his mother died on the wagon route to Kansas. There was no one else to care for him." Will stared at the ground, ashamed though he'd done nothing wrong. Cole rubbed a hand over his jaw. This wasn't part of the arrangement. Annie rose slowly, lifting her chin with quiet dignity. "Life rarely honors arrangements, Mr. Hartman. Bull comes with me. I don't leave him behind." Wind rattled the loose hinge on the barn. A lone horse stamped its hooves in the corral. Cole closed his eyes for a long moment, the way a man prays for patience or courage. "You don't understand," he finally said. "I can't do this." "Can't do what?" "Start over." His voice broke in the middle, raw and unguarded. "I sent for a wife because winter gets long out here, because the house felt too big, too empty." He took a breath. "But when I saw that coach rolling in, I realized I made a mistake. I'm not ready to try again." Annie felt her heart tighten. Not anger, not even hurt, just a deep, bone-cold sadness. Will pressed closer to her side, small fingers clinging desperately. Annie stood straighter. Her voice was soft but iron steady. "Mr. Hartman." "Cole." "We rode 4 days across hard country. Will hasn't eaten a full meal in a week. We have nowhere else to go." She hesitated, forcing the next words out carefully. "If you don't want a wife beneath your roof, I understand. Truly. But at least let us warm ourselves by your fire until I find work in Silver Cross." Cole looked conflicted, jaw tight, eyes stirring with something he tried to bury. Then he saw Will shiver. Really saw it, and something in him cracked. "You can come inside," he said quietly. "Both of you. For now." Annie exhaled with gratitude she dared not show. Will leaned against her, relief melting into his small shoulders. Cole picked up her bag without asking, an instinctive gesture, not tender but not indifferent either, and led them toward the ranch house. The porch boards creaked beneath their boots. When Cole opened the door, warm lamplight spilled across the snow behind them. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke and loneliness. The table held only one plate. The mantel held 2 old photographs, one of younger Cole, and one of a woman with bright eyes and a smile that could light any room. Annie felt a tug of sorrow for him. She knew loss too well. "You can sit," Cole said, clearing his throat. I'll put water on the stove." Will sat stiffly at the edge of a chair, eyes darting around with cautious hope. He watched Cole like he wasn't sure whether to fear him or admire him. Annie sat near the fire, warming her hands. Cole worked silently, moving with the clumsy grace of a man who'd spent too long doing everything alone. He added more wood to the stove, set water to boil, and rummaged for food. Annie noticed his hand shook slightly. "Mr. Hartman," she said gently, "you don't need to act like we're strangers you regret meeting." "We are strangers," he said quietly, "but you invited us in." He stopped, shoulders lowering as if an invisible weight pressed on him. "I don't know why I did," he admitted. Annie watched him, steady and patient. "You did because you're a good man." He looked at her sharply, as if the words hurt. "Because maybe they did." Will suddenly spoke, voice small. "Mr. Hartman, can I ask you something?" Cole turned. "What is it? Are you going to yell at Miss Annie? Or make her cry?" Cole froze, the question hitting like a thrown stone. Annie's breath caught. Cole knelt slowly in front of Will, lowering himself to eye level. "No," he said softly. "I don't yell at people who need help. And I don't make women cry if I can help it." Will's chin trembled, and he nodded once before leaning instinctively toward Cole. Only an inch, barely noticeable, but enough to send a bruise of emotion across Cole's face. Annie saw it. Cole stood abruptly. "I have blankets," he muttered. "I'll get them." He left the room quickly, boots thudding on the stairs. Annie watched him go with a strange ache in her chest. This wasn't rejection. Not truly. This was a wounded man trying not to bleed on anyone else. When he returned, Cole handed Will a folded quilt, patched, worn, but clean. Will hugged it to his chest. Then Cole stepped aside awkwardly. "You can stay in the spare room tonight. Tomorrow we'll see." Annie nodded. "Thank you." Cole's eyes flicked to hers, haunted, conflicted. And though he didn't say another word, their story had already begun. Night settled deep over Hartman Range, quiet as a hell breath. Annie lay awake on the small bed in the spare room, listening to the stove pop and settle. Will slept beside her, curled like a kitten beneath the thick quilt Cole had given him. Every so often his hand reached for hers, even in sleep, as if afraid she might disappear. Annie brushed a strand of hair from the boy's forehead and whispered, "We're safe for now." Safe, but only for now. Her heart kept replaying Cole Hartman's face. How torn he looked, how the weight of something old and painful still pulled at him. She knew grief when she saw it, knew how it changed the shape of a man. Long after midnight, she finally slept. Before sunrise, Cole Hartman was already in the barn, hauling hay and breaking frozen water in the troughs. His movements were sharp, restless, like a man trying to outrun thoughts too heavy to face. "Shouldn't have brought him inside," he muttered to himself. "Shouldn't have let that boy look at me like that." He hit the ice in the trough a little harder than needed. It shattered. The lantern cast amber light over the barn stalls. His horse, Red Jack, snorted and nudged Cole's shoulder, sensing his nerves. Cole sighed and leaned against the post, rubbing the back of his neck. "They don't belong here, Jack," he said. "I can't start all over. I ain't built for it." Jack flicked an ear, unimpressed. Cole breathed out slowly. "And that kid, Will." He looked at me like, he stopped. He couldn't finish the thought. He didn't want anything again. Didn't want to need. Didn't want to risk feeling the same crushing loss he'd felt 2 years ago when sickness took both his wife and the child they'd never gotten to raise. He could still hear the doctor, still see the stillness, still feel the failure. He wasn't ready. He'd never be ready. Inside the house, when Annie woke, dawn light stretched across the small room in soft gray stripes. Will was still asleep, cheeks pink from warmth rather than cold for the first time in days. She slipped from the bed, kissed his forehead, and walked quietly to the kitchen. Cole was at the stove, pouring coffee with a stiff, guarded expression, as if hospitality pained him. "Good morning, Mr. Hartman," Annie said gently. He nodded. "Water's warm. Help yourself." She poured some into a tin cup, warming her hand around it. "You were up early," she said. Ranch don't run itself. Annie smiled a little. Neither does a household. Cole stiffened, sensing the hidden meaning. He set his cup down. Miss Mercer. Annie, I don't want to give you false hope. You didn't, she said softly. You've been honest. He rubbed his forehead. I ain't a cruel man. I just know my limits. And what limit is that? He looked at her then, really looked. Something tired and wounded flickered in his eyes. I can't be a husband right now. And I sure don't know how to be any kind of father. Annie felt her throat tighten. She kept her tone calm. I didn't come expecting you to be either on the first day. Cole blinked at that. She stepped closer, voice gentle. I know what grief looks like, Cole. I know what empty space feels like. You think you're sparing us disappointment, but, Will and I have lived nothing but disappointment for months. He looked away sharply, jaw clenching. I ain't trying to make things worse, he said. You didn't, she replied. You gave us warmth last night. Safety. That's more than most folks have given us. Cole swallowed hard. Some kind of ache flickered across his features. Before he could respond, footsteps pattered behind them. Will appeared, rubbing his eyes. Mornin', Miss Annie. Mornin', Mr. Hartman. Cole turned, surprised by how small the boy looked in the oversized quilt. Mornin', Cole said roughly. You hungry? Will nodded. Cole slid bacon into the pan. Will watched every move like it was a miracle. Annie watched Will, and Cole watched them both. Something in the quiet morning settled around them. Not peace exactly, but something gentler than the day before. Breakfast tension. As they ate, Annie tried to ease the tension. This is good bacon, she said. Cole grunted something that might have been thanks. Will chewed quietly, eyes darting from Annie to Cole like he was measuring the distance between them. Halfway through the meal, Will whispered, Mr. Hartman, do you like us being here? Annie went still. Cole froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. I don't dislike it, he said slowly. Will blinked. Is that good? Cole set his fork down and rubbed his hands together. Son, things ain't that simple. I'm not your son, Will whispered quickly, as if afraid of being scolded. The words hit Cole like a physical blow. Annie shot the boy a soft, pained look. Cole exhaled and leaned forward. You're right. You ain't my son. Will lowered his gaze. But, Cole added quietly, you don't got to be scared to talk to me. Will's head lifted, eyes wide. Annie felt something warm push through her chest. Cole cleared his throat abruptly and stood. I got cattle to check. Miss Mercer, you can stay warm inside. Use whatever you need. And Will? Annie asked. Cole hesitated, then sighed. He can come watch if he wants. Will nearly burst from his chair. Can I really? Can I ride a horse? Can I hold your horses? Cole muttered, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward. You can walk with me. See how things work. Start slow. Will nodded so hard his hair bounced. Annie's eyes softened. Cole had no idea what that small kindness meant. To either of them. Out in the yard. Snow crunched under their boots as Cole led Will out toward the barn. Annie watched from the porch, arms wrapped around herself. Cole pointed to the fence line. Herd broke through here last week. Will studied it with the seriousness of a grown man. Can I help fix it? Cole was about to refuse. Annie could see it in his shoulders, but the boy's hopeful eyes changed his mind. Maybe later, Cole said gently. First, let's feed Jack. They disappeared inside the barn. Moments later, Will's laughter floated out into the cold morning. It was the first time Annie had heard that sound in weeks. She closed her eyes, letting tears freeze on her lashes before wiping them away quickly. Maybe she'd come here for a husband, or maybe God had simply brought her to the one place Will might finally feel like he belonged. 2 hours later, Will and Cole returned from the barn, Will chattering about horses and hay, and Cole quietly listening, trying not to seem softened by it. Annie met them at the door. Did you give Mr. Jack enough hay to last the whole winter? She teased. Will grinned wide. Maybe. Cole shook his head, half amused, half bewildered. Boy talks more than a flock of sparrows. Will puffed his chest proudly. Miss Annie says talking means I'm alive. Cole blinked, caught by the weight of that sentence. Annie stepped forward quickly. Will, why don't you go wash up before lunch? He nodded and ran inside. Cole let out a long breath. He's a good kid, he muttered. Annie smiled. Yes, he is. Cole looked at her, really looked. Annie, I don't know what you expect from me. She stepped closer. I expect nothing. He froze. But I hope, she whispered, for something. The cold wind brushed between them, carrying tension like a quiet storm. Cole swallowed. Let's take this one day at a time, he said. Annie nodded, breath trembling. One day at a time. Later that evening, as the sun bled gold across Pine Hollow Ridge, Cole watched Annie stir stew at the stove and will draw horses on scrap paper by the fire. And for the first time in 2 years, he imagined what it might feel like if this house wasn't empty anymore. He imagined laughter, footsteps, warmth, family. His chest tightened, fear and longing twisting together. He wasn't ready, but he wasn't sure he wanted them to leave either. And that terrified him more than anything. Snow drifted low over the plains the next morning, thick enough to soften the world, but light enough to keep the day moving. Annie Mercer woke before dawn, habit more than rest. Will slept curled against her side, his breath warm and steady. She brushed his hair gently, kissed his forehead, and slipped out of bed. Today mattered. Today would reveal whether the Hartman Ranch was opening its heart to them or closing the door for good. Annie walked quietly into the kitchen. The stove embers still glowed dull red. She fed them small pieces of wood until flame flickered upward. The simple act of tending someone else's fire felt intimate, almost dangerous. As if she were stepping into a place she hadn't been fully invited. But she did it anyway. For will. For survival. For the faint hope she dared not name. She was stirring oats when she heard boots on the porch. Cole Hartman stepped inside, dusting. Snow from his shoulders. His coat was thick with cold. His face was drawn with the kind of tiredness a man doesn't admit. Annie turned from the stove slowly. Good morning, she said softly. Cole paused. He took in the warm stove, the rising smell of oats, the quiet calm she brought. Something in his face softened, not willing, but unable to hide it. I didn't expect breakfast, he said. I know, Annie replied gently. But you'll need something warm before heading out. Cole's throat bobbed. No one had made him breakfast since his wife died. Most days he didn't bother eating at all until the sun was high. The house had been cold, lonely, half lived in. Now Annie stood there stirring oats, as if she had always belonged. He didn't know how to feel about that. Or maybe he did. Maybe that was the problem. Will joins the table. Small footsteps shuffled into the room, followed by a sleepy voice. Mornin', Miss Annie Mornin', Mr. Cole. Cole glanced at Will and cleared his throat. You sleep all right? Will nodded. Best sleep I had since he stopped. Looked down, twisted his finger in the edge of his shirt. Cole felt something twist inside him. He wished the boy didn't know so much about losing things. Annie set bowls on the table. Let's eat before it cools. They sat together, awkward, quiet, unsure where to look. But the warmth in the room felt different than yesterday. Less like a stranger's home, more like a place trying to remember how to breathe again. Will took one bite and exhaled like it was heaven. Miss Annie, this is real good. Cole tasted his. It was simple, warm, comforting, and it reminded him of the meals he'd once shared with his wife, before sickness took her and the child she carried. He swallowed hard and stared at the bowl. You all right, Mr. Hartman? Annie asked gently. Cole nodded, even though the memory stung sharp as winter air. Just thinking. Too early for thinking. Will giggled softly. And, somehow, Cole didn't mind the sound. After breakfast, Annie began washing dishes, sleeves rolled up. Cole moved to help, but she held up a hand. I've got it, she said with a smile. Go on with your morning. He hesitated. You sure? Positive. Will tugged Cole's sleeve. Can I help at the ranch again today? Cole scratched his jaw, torn. It's real cold, he warned. I don't mind. Fing. Cole sighed. But stay where I can see you. Will nodded eagerly. Annie watched them with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Will needed this man. Needed a place to learn, to work, to feel wanted. And Cole, though he didn't know it yet, needed Will just as much. They stepped outside into the crisp morning. In the barn, Cole forked hay into the stalls while Will carried handfuls, doing his best not to drop any. Red Jack followed the boy around like a guardian, snorting into his hair and making Will laugh. You handle animals well, Cole said. Will brightened. Miss Annie says animals like me because I'm small and don't scare 'em. Cole thought about that. Maybe they like you 'cause they can tell when someone's good, he said casually. Will paused. You think I'm good? Cole froze. He hadn't meant to say something so heavy, but the boy's eyes were wide and shining, waiting for an answer. Yeah, Cole said quietly. Yeah, I think you are. Well, straighten, back proud. Cole's chest tightened uncomfortably. He walked to the other end of the barn, pretending to check harnesses while he steadied his breathing. He wasn't ready to feel this. Wasn't ready for a child to look at him like that. Wasn't ready for Annie's soft voice in the kitchen or the way her presence seemed to stitch up places he'd let fall apart. He couldn't want them here. Couldn't get used to the sound of small feet on the porch. Couldn't let himself imagine a life rebuilt. He was still too broken. But broken or not, Wolf followed him around like a shadow. A hopeful, eager shadow that wanted nothing more than to be seen. And Cole couldn't bring himself to push him away. Annie ventures outside. Later that morning, Annie bundled herself in her scarf and stepped out to hang laundry. The cold stung her cheeks, but the sunlight lifted something tight in her chest. Cole looked up from repairing a fence board as she approached. Need a hand? She asked. No, ma'am, Cole replied. You did enough this morning. I like helping. Still, he said, hammer pausing midair, I ain't used to people doing things for me. Annie tilted her head. You ever think maybe you deserve it? Cole's breath caught. He looked away, jaw tightening. No, Annie stepped closer. Everyone deserves a little kindness. Even you. Cole swallowed. Hard. Annie, he said her name like it weighed something. Don't make this harder. I'm not trying to make anything harder, she said softly. I'm just trying to be human. Cole shook his head slightly. You don't understand. Maybe I do. He met her gaze, and something unspoken passed between them. Fear, longing, hurt, hope, tangled into one breathless beat. Will came running then, breaking the moment. Miss Annie, look what I made. He held up a piece of wood he'd carved clumsily into something that almost resembled a horse. Annie knelt. Will, it's beautiful. Will glowed. Cole watched them. Annie's warmth, Will's pride, and something inside him shifted, like ice thawing under early spring sun. Later that afternoon, they walked back toward the house, Will skipping ahead. Annie brushed snow from her skirt. Cole, earlier you said you weren't ready to start over. He nodded stiffly. Do you think you ever will be? Cole looked toward Pine Hollow Ridge, grand, silent, eternal. I don't know, he said honestly, but I ain't felt this kind of quiet in a long time. Not the lonely sort. The other kind. Annie's breath softened. Peace. Something like that. A faint smile tugged Annie's lips. Maybe peace is a sign you're healing. Cole didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. That evening, Annie sat by the stove mending a torn quilt. Cole sat across the room, reading an old newspaper from Silver Cross. Will lay on the rug, drawing horses again. The lamps glowed warm. A house that had once been hollow felt, just for a moment, full. Cole looked up, watching the two of them by the fire. He didn't smile, but something in his face eased, softened, opened. He didn't know what tomorrow held, but for the first time, he wanted to find out. Snow melted into muddy puddles by morning, and the smell of thawing earth drifted across the ranch. Annie stood on the porch with a cup of warm tea, watching the world wake. The wind was cold but gentle, the kind of morning that gave a tired soul a little hope. Will tugged on her coat. Miss Annie, can I go help Mr. Cole today? Please. Annie brushed his hair aside. Only if he says yes. And if you keep your scarf on this time. Will grinned wide. I will. He rushed across the yard toward the barn, boots splashing through puddles. Annie watched him go, her chest warm and aching all at once. He was changing, becoming brighter, safer, because Cole, despite all his quiet walls, was giving the boy something no one had ever given him, belonging. Cole tries to keep his distance. Cole was saddling one of the Mares when Will burst in. Mr. Cole, can I help today? Cole blinked. The boy's enthusiasm caught him off guard every time. You sure you're up for it? Gonna be muddy work. Will nodded eagerly. I don't mind mud. Cole hesitated. He didn't want to get attached. Didn't want the boy to expect too much. Didn't want any looking at him like he was saving them. He wasn't. He was barely saving himself. But Will's little face waited, hopeful, bright, trusting. All right, Cole finally said. Grab a bucket. Will hooped and ran to fetch one. Cole fought the smile, tugging his mouth. Kid's gonna be the death of my nerves, he muttered. But he was already softer than yesterday. And Annie noticed. She lingered by the barn door, watching quietly. Not interfering. Not pushing him. Just watching him teach a small boy how to steady a horse's reins. The sight did something deep inside her. A sudden danger. By afternoon, the sky turned sharp. Cold wind. Thin clouds. A smell Annie recognized from years of traveling. A storm coming. She stepped out onto the porch. Her heart tightened. Will. Cole. Come inside. Her voice carried across the yard. Will stopped. Looked up. Cole straightened slowly, noticing the sky. I think we should go in, Annie called again. Cole shaded his eyes. It'll pass. No, Annie insisted. This feels wrong. Cole opened his mouth to argue. Then thunder cracked, loud, sudden, close. The mare spooked, jerking against the rope. Will startled. He slipped. The horse reared. Will! Annie screamed, running. Cole moved faster than thought. He lunged, grabbing Will by the back of his coat and yanking him out of the way just as the mare's hooves crashed down where the boy had been. Annie's knees went weak. Cole held Will tight, breathing hard, too hard. You all right? Cole rasped. Will nodded shakily. Cole set him down and rounded on Annie, not angry but shaken. You were right, he said, voice rough. We should have gone in sooner. Annie touched Will's face, checking him with trembling hands. You scare me to death, she whispered. Will leaned into her, small and trembling. Sorry, Miss Annie. It's not your fault, sweetheart. I'm just glad you're okay. Cole watched them, Annie holding the boy like he was hers. Will clinging to her like she was home. Something inside Cole cracked open. Not painfully, but deeply, inside the house. They rushed into the house just as rain exploded from the clouds, slamming against the windows. Will sat wrapped in a blanket, still shaking a little. Cole paced. Annie brewed tea with trembling fingers. The silence was thick. Finally, Cole spoke. Annie, what you said outside about the storm? You saw it before I did. My father taught me to read weather, Annie said softly. Traveling teaches you to listen to the sky. Cole nodded, guilty. I should have listened sooner. You got him out in time, she whispered. That's what matters. We'll watch the two of them with wide, trusting eyes. Cole breaks his silence. When Will finally relaxed enough to sip his tea, Cole stepped out onto the porch to breathe. Rain hammered the roof. The storm howled through the valley. Annie followed him quietly. He didn't turn. He spoke into the rain. I almost lost him. Annie folded her arms around herself. But you didn't. Cole's voice was rough, raw. I don't know how to do this, Annie. Do what? He swallowed. Care about people again. The rain softened, as if listening. Cole continued, words barely above a whisper. I wasn't supposed to get close to that boy. Or you. I told myself not to. But today, when he slipped, something inside me, it split open. Annie's breath caught, because she felt the same. Cole finally turned, rain glistening on his jacket, eyes darker than storm clouds. If anything had happened to him, or you, he shook his head. I don't think I could have taken it. Annie stepped forward slowly, cautiously, as if approaching a wounded animal. Cole, no, he said quietly. I need to say this. His eyes locked with hers. You two walked into my home like a spark in a dead hearth. I didn't ask for it. Didn't know I needed it. But you're warming this place again. Annie felt her throat close. Cole, he looked away sharply. But I'm scared. Terrified. Because people I care about don't stay. Lightning lit the porch. Thunder rolled. Rain pounded. Inside, Will hummed. Softly, safe under blankets. Annie moved closer until she stood right in front of Cole. We're not leaving, she said quietly. You don't know that. I do, she whispered. Because Will has never been safer. And because her voice shook. I haven't felt hope in years, Cole. But this place, you make me feel it again. Cole stared at her. Some emotion, huge and fragile, rose in his eyes. You think hope's enough? He asked. No, Annie said softly. But it's a start. The storm breaks. The rain slowed. The thunder drifted farther away. Cole let out a long, unsteady breath. Annie, I don't want to push you away, but I don't know how to let you stay either. Annie reached out, gently taking his hand. You don't have to know today. His fingers closed around hers. Not tight, not possessive, just needing the anchor. Just promise me one thing, Annie said. Cole swallowed. What? Don't decide you don't need us. Cole exhaled shakily. Eyes soft, voice barely a rasp. I already know I do. Her breath hitched. He stepped a tiny bit closer. Their hands stayed braided together, rain cooling around them. Inside the house, Will began to hum a soft tune. And on the porch, in the fading stormlight, something shifted, delicate but undeniable. Not love, not yet, but the fragile beginning of something that might one day become unbreakable. The storm had faded, but its memory still clung to the porch. Wet earth, drifting mist, and the faint echo of thunder rolling somewhere beyond the ridgeline. The world felt washed clean. Cole's hand stayed in Annie's. Not tight, not trembling anymore. Just steady, solid, human. He looked down at their joined fingers like he wasn't sure how he'd ended up holding her hand, or how long he'd be allowed to keep it. Annie didn't pull away. She simply breathed. Slow, calm, present. Inside, Will's humming softened into silence, then into the quiet shuffle of someone moving around the small living room. You Cole? Cole asked, voice low. A little, Annie admitted. Cole let her hand go, slowly, reluctantly, and pulled off his coat. He draped it over her shoulders with a gentleness that didn't match the hard lines of the rancher he'd been an hour ago. There, he said, storm shouldn't have soaked you to the bone. It wasn't the storm, she whispered before she could stop herself. His eyes lifted to hers. Something flickered there, wariness, wanting, and something deeper he fought to hide. Let's get inside, he murmured. Before you freeze through. Annie nodded. Cole opened the door for her, and the moment she stepped inside, warmth wrapped around her. The small house glowed from lantern light. The scent of coffee drifted from the kitchen. Will had set out blankets and was kneeling by the hearth, coaxing the fire alive again. You two all right out there? Will asked without looking up. Cole answered first. Yeah, we're good. Annie wasn't sure that was true. Not yet, but maybe they were closer to it than before. Will stood, dusting ashes from his hands. His eyes flicked between them, measuring, noticing, filing away details he'd never comment on directly. Fire's strong again, Will said. House'll warm up soon. Cole nodded. Thanks. Then he hesitated. His gaze drifted to the floor, then to Annie, then away. Will, can you take the first check around the barn tonight? It wasn't a big request. Ranch hands often checked on the horses after storms. But Annie knew Cole was really asking for space. Sure, Will said easily. I'll grab my jacket. He headed out with a soft whistle and closed the door behind him. Alone again, the silence settled warm and heavy. Cole ran a hand through his damp hair, exhaled slow, then leaned one shoulder against the wall, like he needed something solid to hold him upright. You didn't have to stay on that porch, he said. I know. You could have gone inside. I know that too. So why didn't you? Annie moved closer, not touching, just near enough that he could feel her warmth. Because you look like a man carrying the whole sky, and no one should carry that alone. He gave a humorless breath. Not quite a laugh. I thought I was hiding it better. You weren't, Annie said softly. Not from someone who's been tired in the same way. Cole's jaw flexed. He lifted his head, looked at her like she wasn't just someone standing in his house, but someone who might see him clearer than he saw himself. Sit, he asked, gesture faint toward the table. Annie nodded. They sat across from each other. The lantern between them cast a warm circle of light across the table's scarred surface. Cole folded his hands, let them rest, then dropped them apart like he couldn't decide how to hold himself. I'm not good at this, he said finally. At talking, Annie asked gently. At being seen. Her chest tightened. You don't have to say anything you don't want to. He rubbed a thumb along the grain of the table. But I want to, he admitted. That surprised her. He didn't look at her when he spoke. Maybe he couldn't yet. When Rebecca died, he began, voice barely above a whisper. The world went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Just empty. Annie didn't breathe. Cole kept going. I stopped feeling things. Stopped letting anyone close. Well, tried. Hank tried. Folks in town tried. But I kept them all at arm's length. I didn't want to, he stopped. Corrected himself. I couldn't let myself care again. She didn't touch him. Not yet. She let his words fall into the soft quiet between them. I told myself it was safer that way, he said. For Emma. For me. For everyone. Annie swallowed. Does it still feel safer? He finally lifted his eyes to hers. No, the word held weight. Meaning. Truth. Annie's heart clenched. He looked away again, shaking his head. Will told me once that grief isn't a river you cross. It's one you learn to walk in without drowning. Cole huffed lightly. I told him he was full of hell. Annie smiled faintly. Sounds like him. But he was right, Cole said. I've been trying to live on dry land. Pretending the water wasn't still pulling at my feet. When you're here, it's like I remember how to breathe again. Her breath caught. He leaned back, eyes closing briefly, like saying the words cost him and freed him at the same time. You scare me, Annie. She blinked. Me? You make me feel things I put away a long time ago. Annie's voice came out softer than she intended. It's all right to feel again. It hurts. Only at first. His eyes opened slowly. The storm outside had quieted hours ago, but something else was breaking now. Something inside him. His defenses? His fear? Or something softer? Some small part that wanted to hope again? Annie reached across the table. Stopped. May I? She asked gently. Cole hesitated, then nodded once. She placed her hand over his, warm, steady, sure. He exhaled like her touch released a breath he'd been holding for years. They stayed that way for a long moment. No ruse, no expectations. Just two people in a quiet house letting the world fall away. Finally, Cole's voice broke the silence. Tomorrow, he said slowly, I want to take you and Emma into town. Show you the general store, the church, the ridge above the valley. Maybe let folks see us together. Us. He nodded, still staring at their joined hands. Us. Annie felt something warm spread through her chest. But, Cole added, voice tightening, the townsfolk they talk. And not kindly. They'll have opinions. Questions. Judgments. Especially about you. She squeezed his hand lightly. I've lived with judgment all my life, Cole. What they say won't change who I am. He finally looked up. You sure? Yes. A long silence passed. Soft. Unbroken. Then a small voice drifted from the hallway. Papa. Emma stood there, rubbing her eyes. Her blanket dragged behind her like a small tail. Cole straightened instantly. What's wrong, sweetheart? Emma patted forward in bare feet. Had a bad dream. Cole rose halfway, until Emma's gaze slid to Annie. Can Mama Annie tuck me in? Annie froze. Cole did too. The word Mama hung between them like a fragile glass ornament. Emma blinked sleepily. Please, she whispered. Annie's throat went tight. She stood, walked to the little girl, knelt so they were eye level. I'd love to, she said softly. Emma smiled, small, relieved, and climbed into Annie's arms like she'd been doing it her whole life. Cole watched them, not with surprise, not with fear, but with a soft, aching wonder. As Annie carried Emma to her room, Cole stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame. Thank you, he murmured. Annie brushed a hand over Emma's hair once she was tucked in. For what? She whispered. For giving her what I can't, Cole answered. Then, quieter, for giving me what I didn't think I deserved anymore. Annie turned. Their eyes met. A soft current passed between them. Warm, unhurried, impossibly gentle. Not a promise. Not yet, but the beginning of one. The ranch wind sighed through the eaves. The lantern flickered. Emma murmured in her sleep, curling into the blankets. Annie stepped back into the hallway. Cole stood close. Too close. His breath brushed her cheek. Good night, Annie, he said quietly. She swallowed. Good night, Cole. He didn't touch her. She didn't touch him. But as they parted down the hall, both carried something new with them. Something fragile. Something dangerous. Something hopeful. Something that felt like the first warm day after a long, unforgiving winter. A feeling neither dare name, but both knew was growing. Slowly, steadily, unstoppably. Morning broke soft and gold over the valley, the kind of light that makes a day feel like a promise. Annie woke before the rooster, stretching beneath the quilt Emma had insisted she use. The house was quiet, too quiet. She slipped out of bed, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and stepped into the hallway. The boards creaked lightly under her feet. She found Cole in the kitchen, standing by the stove, pouring water into the coffee pot. He looked tired but lighter somehow, like a man who'd slept with one less ghost on his chest. "Morning," Annie whispered. Cole didn't turn, but she saw his shoulders ease. "Morning." He set the pot on the stove, then leaned against the counter, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't sleep much," he said. "Storm keep you up?" He shook his head. "No. Thinking kept me up." Annie stepped closer. "You thinking about yesterday?" she asked gently. "Thinking about everything," he admitted. "Thinking about you. Emma. Will." He swallowed. "Thinking about what I'm doing. What I'm risking." Annie held her breath. Cole turned to her finally, and there was something raw in his eyes. "You said yesterday not to decide I don't need you." He stepped closer. "I didn't." Her heart thudded once, deep and heavy. "But wanting you here," he added, voice low, "wanting will here means facing the life I've buried with Rebecca. And I'm scared, Annie. I'm scared of failing again, losing again." Annie's voice softened. "You didn't fail yesterday," she said. "You protected Will. You protected me. And you let yourself feel something again." Cole studied her a long moment, and for the first time, he didn't look away. Emma's interruption. Tiny footsteps pattered across the floor. Emma appeared in the doorway, hair tangled, rubbing her eyes. "Papa," she yawned. "Is Miss Annie staying again tonight?" Cole glanced at Annie, searching, uncertain, then knelt beside his daughter. "We'll see, sweetheart." Emma frowned. She looked at Annie. "Do you want to stay?" Annie crouched, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face. "I'd like to, sugar." Emma smiled a slow, sleepy smile and wandered toward the table, climbing into her usual chair. Cole exhaled, a slow breath that seemed to loosen something inside him. Annie felt it. He was choosing them, even if the choice scared him. The trip into town. The sky cleared to a bright blue by noon. Cole hitched the wagon while Annie packed a few things. "Town will be curious," Cole warned as he tightened the last strap. "They talk." Annie shrugged gently. "So let them talk." She lifted Will into the wagon. He grinned wide, the kind of grin that warmed the whole morning. Cole helped Emma up next, hands steady on her waist. Then he turned to Annie. "You need help?" he asked quietly. "I can climb," she teased. But when she put a foot on the wagon step, he offered his hand anyway. She took it, not because she needed help, but because he needed to offer it. His hand lingered a beat longer than necessary before he let go. Eyes on them. The ride into town was peaceful, Will humming, Emma chattering, Cole holding the reins loose but sure. But as soon as the wagon rolled down Ridge Street, heads turned. Shopkeepers paused. The blacksmith stopped hammering. Two older women near the bakery leaned close, whispering. Annie felt every stare. Cole did too. His jaw tightened, shoulders squared, but he didn't turn the wagon around. He drove right up to the general store. He climbed down, then offered Annie his hand in front of everyone. She took it. Gasps carried through the small crowd. Will hopped down after her and grabbed Cole's sleeve. "Papa, can I get licorice?" "Maybe," Cole said, ruffling his hair gently. The blacksmith, a broad man named Harlan Tate, stepped forward. "Cole," he asked carefully, "this the mail-order bride you turned away?" Cole stiffened. Annie's stomach knotted. Harlan looked at her with something like disapproval, or maybe pity. She couldn't tell. Cole stepped between them. "Her name is Annie," he said firmly, "and she's here as my guest, as someone I respect." Harlan blinked at Cole's tone. Then he nodded. "Well, that's different from what folks been saying." "Let them say what they want," Cole said. "I know what's true." He took Annie's hand again, openly, deliberately, and walked her toward the store. The crowd murmured, but Annie didn't shrink. She walked with Cole Hartman beside her, his hand solid in hers, and for the first time in years, she felt proud to stand anywhere. A small piece of trouble. Inside the store, Mr. Fillmore greeted them with raised eyebrows. Cole Hartman, I didn't expect to see you today. And with company. Cole gave a single nod. Need feed, sugar, coffee. And something for the kids. Annie wandered to the cloth section, fingers brushing soft calico. We'll tug her sleeve. Miss Annie, can we look at the penny toys? Of course. Emma stayed close to Cole, snuggling into his coat. But then a voice sliced through the peaceful moment. Well, I'll be. Cole Hartman finally found himself another woman. Annie froze. A woman stood near the counter, red hair pinned tight, eyes sharp as needles, mouth curved into a cruel smirk. Martha Boone. Annie didn't know her, but she knew the type. Cole stiffened. Martha, he said flatly. Oh, don't look so sour. I'm just surprised. She eyed Annie slowly. This the one you ordered by letter? Thought you sent her back. Will bristled. Emma clung to Cole's leg. Cole's voice dipped low. Martha, leave her be. Just saying. Martha shrugged. Don't get too attached, Cole. That one looks like she might run off the first time she gets spooked. Annie's chest tightened. Before she could step back, Cole stepped forward between them. His voice was quiet. Cold. Annie isn't going anywhere. Martha laughed. We'll see about that. She left the store with a smirk. Annie stared at the floor. Old shame. Old fear. The same feeling she'd left behind on the eastbound train. Cole approached gently. Annie. She didn't lift her head. Annie, he repeated, softer this time. She finally looked up. I know what people think, she said quietly. I know what they say, but I'm not going anywhere. I chose to be here. Cole's chest rose slowly. I know, he murmured, but I needed you to hear it out loud. And no, I mean it. Her breath hitched. Come on, he said. Let's finish up. The ride home. The sun dipped low as they left town, the sky burning orange along the ridge. We'll chewed licorice. Emma held a new wooden doll. Annie sat beside Cole, close enough that their shoulders brushed when the wagon rocked. You didn't have to defend me, she said. Yes, he replied quietly. I did. She watched his profile, strong, steady, troubled, gentle. Cole, she whispered. What are we doing? He flicked the reins lightly. I don't know, he said, but I know what I'm not doing. What's that? I'm not sending you away. The wagon wheels clattered softly. I want you here, he continued. Want you and Will. Want Emma to have someone who tucks her in without fear she'll vanish. Annie swallowed hard. He turned his head slightly, eyes shining in the setting sun. I want you to stay, Annie. Nightfall. Back at the ranch, Cole carried Emma inside, half asleep on his shoulder. Will ran ahead to show Annie the wooden horse he'd carved better this time. Annie hung back on the porch, watching Cole tuck Emma into bed. When he returned, he stepped outside with her. The night air was crisp. Stars spilled across the sky. I meant what I said, Cole murmured. So did I. Cole's breath caught. You sure, he asked. Yes. Silence stretched warm between them. Then Cole stepped closer. Slow. Careful. His hand hovered near her cheek. Can I? He whispered. Annie nodded. Cole touched her gently, the lightest stroke along her jaw, like she was something precious, something fragile, something he'd been afraid to reach for. She leaned into his hand. He exhaled slowly. Annie Mercer, he said quietly, you brought me back to life. Her heart trembled. You brought yourself back, Cole. He shook his head. No, you lit the fire. I just followed the warmth. She smiled, small and soft. Then he kissed her. Not deep, not fast, just long enough to say everything he wasn't brave enough to speak. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested gently against hers. We'll figure the rest out, he whispered. Together. Yes, she breathed. Together. Inside, Will's laughter echoed down the hall. Emma called for Annie to tuck her in again. Cole smiled. You better go, he said. Annie nodded. As she stepped inside, he caught her hand. Don't ever think you're alone here, he said. Not again. Her eyes softened. Good night, Cole. Good night, Annie. He watched her walk down the hallway, watched the light she carried, watched the home they were all building from scratch. He stood on the porch long after she disappeared from view, breathing the cold night air. For the first time in years, he felt whole. He felt hope. He felt love growing in the cracks of old hurt, steady, warm, unbreakable. And as the stars glowed brighter over the ranch, Cole Hartman finally understood. He hadn't just made room for Annie and Will. He had made room for a future. A future he never believed he deserved. A future he wasn't letting go of again. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wild West Emotional Tales, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.